Good. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you are able to hear me and also see the presentation slides up. If you can't, please let us know in the chat, which Suzan and Noor are monitoring. So we will begin with a brief introduction. First of all, just a huge welcome to everyone to our book launch, to our illustrated storybook, Get to Know Us, Our Lives with Mental Illness in the Palestinian Community, a book co-produced and written by a group of friends with mental illness, Yoke Rabaia and Suzan Mitwalli from Birzeit University, myself from King's College London, and practitioners from the Palestinian Counseling Center. First of all, I would like to say that the session is being recorded. We will make the presentation publicly available, however, not the discussion afterwards. We also have with us Noor Hamoudeh, who has been a loyal research assistant for this project over quite some time, many years, and who is supporting us also with the chat to monitor your questions. The way we are going to go about the session today is that we're giving an introduction to the storybook. This is going to be delivered by Yoke Rabaia and myself. Suzan Mitwalli did yesterday the heavy lifting during the Arabic presentation of our book launch. But she will join us in the Q&A. At the end, we will have about 15 minutes question and answers, a Q&A session, during which you can either unmute yourself, raise your hand using the hand function, or also during the presentation already put questions into the chat. And we will be monitoring those, and we will do our best to get to them during the discussion. So without further ado, again, just to thank you for joining us here. We're really pleased to have this audience for a book that has been in the making over quite some time, and I will just jump into the presentation and Yoke will take over from me at some point. Now I need to be able to move the slides. Here we go. So I will start with the opening statement of our book. In the community, we are called crazy. We want you to know that we aren't. We are mentally ill, but not crazy. This book is an invitation for you to get to know us and to bust your negative attitudes towards mental illness. This is needed because the existing fear and false ideas around mental illness lead to unjust exclusion and discrimination of people like us in our society. This is how the book begins, co-written by the group of friends with mental illness. Together, we aim to understand community integration and participation of persons with severe mental illness in the context of Palestine, using ethnography and participatory action research. Our project formed part of the Mental Health and Justice Project, a multidisciplinary research initiative funded by the Wellcome Trust that addresses public policy challenges that arise at the interface where mental health and mental health care interact with principles of human rights in contexts of peace and war. So who are we? Our research brought together a group of experts of 10 persons with lived experience of severe mental illness, researchers from Birzeit University, so Yoke Rabaia and Suzan Mitwalli, and King's College, myself, and practitioners from the Palestinian Counseling Center. Those among us with lived experience have decided to call themselves Group of Friends with Mental Illness. Real names were not an option due to the pervasive stigma and discrimination against those with severe mental illness in the community. The group meets since many years regularly in the rehabilitation center run by the Palestinian Counseling Center. There are 3 women and 7 men, aged between mid-20s to mid-70s, and suffer from different mental illnesses, such as, for example, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, or post-traumatic stress disorder. What we want to do in this presentation today is outline the experiences of community inclusion and participation as we write about them in the book, discuss community inclusion and participation as a human right, but also introduce you to the ethical and practical challenges that we faced as we were on the journey of writing the book, and then think together with you about book dissemination and advocacy. So the first part of the presentation will focus on experiences of community inclusion and participation, and I'm handing over to Yoke Rabaia to guide us through this part.
Thank you, Hanna, and good morning, everybody. Together, we explored what living and participating in the Palestinian community means to those with lived experience, with a focus on the notion of community, life with mental illness, equity, spare time, and the rights to medication and work. Let us provide you with some insight now into what we discovered. When thinking with the group about community, we realized that community is really a very complex idea consisting of various components of institutions, activities, values, history, and culture. The group had positive as well as negative thoughts when exploring the notion of community. Positively, they said it brings people together through socializing, providing mutual help and support, and by being politically active. Yet, community was not easy to navigate when experiencing mental illness. Group members sometimes experienced it as unjust, controlling, oppressive, and intolerant. Most participants described having been mocked and ridiculed and being called majnoon, that means crazy. One member is quoted in the book saying, "We are not well integrated in the community. This makes us feel uncomfortable. And we keep thinking, why are we not like them? We can be like other people, but they don't allow us." The Israeli military occupation and related violence further impacts on community inclusion negatively. Just like other Palestinians, our group members are regularly exposed to the general violence of the Israeli military occupation, including movement restrictions due to checkpoints, raiding of their homes and villages, being shot at, injuries, imprisonment, and torture. Some of the group members who had experienced imprisonment and torture traced the beginning of their illness back to those experiences. This, they write, has left us physically and mentally scarred for life. They also describe how the military occupation reduces their radius of social interaction and community participation further as they avoid certain places where they feel unsafe. In terms of protection, families play an important role as they try to shield their family members from encounters with the Israeli military. Indeed, the family home was the primary communal space where people with mental illness could participate while receiving care and support. However, also the extent of involvement in family activities was dependent on several factors, including the perceived severity of the illness, family attitudes, gender, and the nature of the occasion. Some felt they could easily participate in family events, while others complained that their families failed to invite them out of shame and worried that people might ridicule them. One of the women of the group said, "I don't like it when I am left at home to watch television, when my family goes to a wedding. I like going out too. I like to talk to people, and I like it when people ask me questions." Social life outside the home was mainly in the neighborhood. Depending on the severity of their illness condition and economic status, men could go to local cafes, the mosque, and the market, where they could meet friends and socialize, while women's social life tended to be more confined to neighbors or family members. Most participants complained, though, that they had lost friends since the onset of their illness, as these friends could not make sense of their health condition or felt ashamed to be seen in public with someone who was widely considered majnoon, crazy. Particularly painful was the experience of being considered unemployable, even though many felt that paid work was crucial for their well-being as well as for their financial and social standing. One of the men in the research group said, "People who have schizophrenia, like me, can hear voices, and I still hear them. But when I talk, I don't hear voices. It is when I am alone that I hear them. Work and medication ease these voices, but work makes them actually go away. Yet, finding paid work was challenging due to various forms of discrimination. This could include being refused employment when they discovered their mental health diagnosis, or being dismissed from work when they experienced a relapse, or even simply having to quit because of distrust or hostility from their colleagues. To be able to function in society, group members emphasized the importance of medication in the book. Yet, they explained that the side effects of the medication could decrease their ability to commit to work duties and their social interaction. They write, besides making us feel good, it can also make us feel tired, dizzy, less able to move, and it can make us gain weight. At the same time, medication is often not available in the Ministry of Health clinics, and that forces people with mental illness to pay for it out of pocket at pharmacies. The situation can become even worse when the medication is not available at the pharmacy, which means that people in need have to go without it, sometimes for months on end. A man writes in the book, when I don't get the medication, sometimes I end up destroying things, or I become aggressive with my family. And because of that, I warn people to stay away from me when I cannot find the medication. I need to be able to take my medicine. When I don't find it, I am very worried. But when I have the medication, I am fine. I can work and earn money. To have the opportunity to participate in community life requires for the community to treat people with mental illness equitably. This, our group members write, involves creating spaces where they can feel safe, respected, and valued. With irony, one of them said something along the lines of, we know that we can't be pilots or directors of big companies, but this doesn't mean that we cannot work or contribute to community life. All agreed that they require equitable access to education, work, and healthcare. And just like the shorter kid in this picture, they may require a little extra support to be able to take part in community life like everybody else. It is the limitations of their illness which must be taken into account. Now we come to the second part of our presentation, community participation as a human right. While community inclusion of people with severe mental illness in context of war is challenging, it is not a luxury, but a human right. The human right to community inclusion in context of peace and war is outlined by the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the CRPD. In its Article 19, living independently and being included in the community, the Convention states, states parties to the present Convention recognize the equal right of all persons with disabilities to live in the community with choices equal to others, and shall take effective and appropriate measures to facilitate full enjoyment by persons with disabilities of this right and their full inclusion and participation in the community. Palestine is signatory to the CRPD since 2014 and should therefore actively promote disability rights, including for people with severe mental illness. While efforts in this direction are underway, they are challenged by the ongoing conflict and Israeli military occupation. Human rights violations are regularly committed against people with severe mental illness, as they are subjected to targeted killings, injuries, and torture by Israeli occupation forces. Violence and intentional de-development of infrastructure and essential services have been linked to mental health challenges among the Palestinian population overall. Despite this, professional community support for people with mental illness has been limited, including the provision of appropriate and sustainable mental health care. However, we know very little about how people with severe mental illness and their families experience this situation. Our illustrated storybook is therefore a valuable resource. It provides important insights directly from those with severe mental illness, how they experience living in the community, and it has been fully co-produced following the disability rights motto, nothing about us without us. And here I will give over to Hanna, who will continue with the third part of our presentation.
Thank you, Yoke. And apologies to those who joined late. We had some technical issues letting people in. But the session is being recorded, so you hopefully can catch up for some of it later. So as Yoke was saying, we co-produced the book and working in 3 phases over 3 consecutive years. Each year, we conducted a series of 10 to 12 meetings with a group of people with lived experience, our co-researchers. The meetings had a set routine, starting with attendance taking, developing a plan for the day, some physical exercise, group work on the research theme of the day, cooking and eating a meal together, and planning the following week. As the group of friends with mental illness worked as co-researchers for the project, they were paid for their work. Phase 1, that was in 2018, consisted of weekly meetings over 3 months at the Palestinian Counseling Center. It's a rehabilitation center to research different aspects of what living in the community means to members themselves. At the end of each session, the topic and method of discovery was decided for the next week. To unlock stories and insights, we worked quite creatively, having pens, paper, Post-its, watercolors, recorders, cameras on hand. We visualized feelings through collages, images, color schemes, drawings. Those with lived experience interviewed each other to fill out charts to compare their experiences, which was really also quite interesting to them. And we went on community walks to explore and reflect on the surrounding together. Following the 3 months, us researchers summarized the findings by bringing them into the shape of chapters. And we were lucky to find the famous Palestinian artist, Amer Shomali, willing to draw the illustrations for the book based on a style that the group had decided on. The style was to be realistic, not cartoon-like, to make sure that readers will understand that what is being written in the book is based on real people's experiences and not cartoonish stories. Phase 2 then took place in 2019. The second year consisted of another round of weekly meetings over 3 months, during we read, discussed, revised, rewrote, and redrew the book content. Every week we worked through 1 chapter together, discussing sentence by sentence and the meanings, and finding out whether what was written actually resonated with people's everyday experiences. This was hard work, especially for those who were significantly cognitively impaired or had a hard time concentrating. We moved through the pages, as I said before, sentence by sentence, to summarize what has been sort of heard in our own words. And group members provided each other with support throughout this process to keep frustrations to a minimum. At some point during these meetings, members said, well, it's good that we are revising all these stories, that we remember what it is that we have researched, but we actually really want to start disseminating initial findings and advocating for our rights. So what we did, we created together, or decided together, to create these kind of advocacy cards, spelling out rights and demands for community inclusion and participation on an equal basis as others. There were different cards. Each card had a different message, had a different right outlined, a different demand outlined, with various pictures. So they were quite colorful and nice to see. We then went to distribute the cards in public places such as bakeries, pharmacies, cafes, and schools. Importantly, we also gave presentations at the Open University, a summary of the event you can see here on the Open University website, and at a local library. Together, we also organized meetings with experts such as the director of the mental health unit of the Ministry of Health, psychiatrists, and social workers. This kind of labor did not come easy, considering that our members had to enter spaces where they often felt stigmatized or even mistreated. It came therefore as a pleasant surprise when they were welcomed warmly and with respect. Moving on to phase 3, This included fewer meetings and was focused on finalizing the book and exposing it to the real world via focus group discussions, which we co-designed and carried out together. Invited were mental health practitioners, activists, students who explored and discussed the book with us, made recommendations of how to improve the book itself, and we then implemented most of these changes and discussed with us how the book could be used as a source for advocacy and training. Through these joint reflections, we then further improved the book, as I said, and finally started to print the Arabic and English versions of the book. And this accomplishment we are presenting today. And of course, we hope that you explore the book on the website and possibly also get a hard copy of the book. So please get in touch with us about that. The journey was a fantastic journey, but it was not without challenges. So the book, we say, has been a labor of love over several years. To get it right, we moved slowly, making sure everyone was on board, could have their voices heard and make an impact. Such slow working was both joyful and frustrating. So the group of friends with mental illness appreciated it, and at the same time, really couldn't wait to hold the book in their hands and share it with others. Similarly, the artist Amer Shomali had to adapt to a completely new way of working. At some point, he said, laughingly to us, "When I started working with you, my daughter was just born. When I finished the project, she started going to school." So that was a message for us to know that it was really something different for him to work in this way. But this kind of slow working was not just a practical requirement for us, it was also an ethical imperative. Ethics, we did not understand as just the sort of tick box exercise that you start before a project. But of course, we received ethical approval from both Birzeit University and King's College London to carry out what was considered high-risk research. It was considered high risk as it involved people with severe mental illness who often face stigma everywhere in the world and who are considered less able to give informed consent to participate in a project like this. In our project, the group of people with lived experience were hired as researchers rather than participants or informants. The latter point, however, was a sticking point for our ethics boards and also the Palestinian Counseling Centers and the families of people with lived experience. Questions we therefore had to grapple with connected to what does it mean to co-produce research, co-own data, and publish together? What risks does such work expose people to? What would happen if their real names were to be made public? Would there be social repercussions like ridicule or even violence? Legally, we were acquired not only to get informed consent from the group members, but also their families. While we felt uncomfortable with this kind of assenting process, believing that our soon-to-be colleagues should make their own decisions more autonomously with the support of others, there was no way around it for us. It was made very clear to us. To ensure that everyone involved was comfortable, though, to participate in the group, we practiced consenting as a process. During meetings, we checked in with people if they were still happy to be part of it, repeated the purpose of the project regularly, and made sure that those who wanted to break away from the project for a while, take a break as such, could take it without feeling excluded from the process of co-production. We took all decisions together, but followed the lead of those with lived experience. When it came to the question of authorship, another sticking point, as it turned out, none of our members felt comfortable having their real names on the cover of the book. They decided on a group name together and requested pseudonyms when mentioned as sort of individual persons in the book. Similarly, our community walks remained close to the rehabilitation center due to safety concerns by the group members themselves and not so much us. Wanting to have a nice time rather than being exposed to stares and nasty commentary, we walked along the outskirts, reflecting on community life somewhat from the margins. It was therefore a huge step when members decided to expose themselves and their experiences fully to university students, people at the library, and experts at the events following the production of the advocacy cards. It was a big step. During such meetings, some of the group members interacted with people on their own terms, deciding on the spot to go on stage and tell their story, rather than following a scripted agenda influenced by us. This made our interactions all the more authentic and powerful, we believe. Practical challenges that we faced were, though, not just reported to community sort of attitudes and stigma, but also mental illness itself. As mental illness fluctuated, so did the ability, of course, to participate of some of our members. In the book, they reflected on the challenges related to these, especially related to communication challenges, saying, and I quote one of them, "It is important to admit that communication does not come easily to many of us. For those of us with speech problems, it is difficult to articulate words, while others may be more introverted or less able to make sense of what other people say or do. This meant, however, and while we acknowledge this, it did not mean for us that people could not contribute to the project. On the contrary, we had to make sure that the conditions were right and possibilities were such that they responded to the fluctuating abilities of our group members. Now that the book is published as hard copy, after all this time, the many phases of working, the many iterations, it is available as hard copy, and you can feel free to get in touch with us to acquire one, and online as PDF for free, and also audio recordings, but the audio recordings are only available in Arabic. We believe that we can all play a part in raising awareness and making sort of people aware about the lived lives of people who are most marginalized in society. So what we would really hope is that you read the book, share it with people who you think might be interested in it, use it as part of your training, your teaching, and explore other ways in which you think you could sort of engage with these stories. And of course, we would really appreciate to hear your reflections and reactions so that we can communicate them to the group of friends with mental illness. Here you have our contact information, but you should also find us, of course, online.